Good morning. I'm Pete Najarian, and this is The Take on a Wednesday, hump day. And I'll tell you what, we've been watching something that's been playing out time and time again in the marketplace, which is single news story affecting the markets. Now, we had dramatic effects over a month ago, 6, 8 weeks ago. Certainly, we talked about all the algorithmic trading, the bots, and all that is involved in the markets. That certainly still is in play. Now, not to the same effect that it had before, but certainly we are seeing that and how fast these moves can happen. And I'll give you a great example. Yesterday, Boeing. Suddenly there was the news out in Boeing. Now the markets were up nicely, running up about 400 points, and suddenly you get this big move from Boeing, the news about further scrutiny. They're looking at the legal and the regulatory issues that are facing with the 737 MAX. So suddenly the markets completely start to dissipate and just crumbled to the downside. It was just like you turning on and off a light switch, just that move, just amazing how fast that really can occur in the markets today. Now, the Big Five, they really were a big part of this as well. Big Five, Big Ten, whatever you want to call it. But I picked out a couple of names. So Netflix dropped about $20 in a matter of moments. Facebook dropped from 189 to 182. Google lost about $55. Tesla dropped from 805 down to 766, somewhere in that range. So gives you a pretty good idea, however, of just which names have been moving to the upside, powering to the upside, and then powering back down to the downside. So when you look at this in the equal weighted S&P 500 versus what we all look at, which is the S&P 500, which is market cap weighted, over the last week, the market cap, it's up about 0.9%. You look at the equal weight, it's up about 4.3%. So it does give you a sense of something that I've been trying to put out there more and more, which is there are other aspects of the S&P, of the big cap, not those gigantic cap names, but big cap names that are moving and have had some nice performance. One of those areas that I've been trying to highlight more and more over the last couple of weeks has been the XLF, the financials. You look at it and they have had a nice, steady kind of a move to the upside. Energy's caught a little bit of a bid. Crazy as it sounds, knowing what's going on with oil. Materials also being a part of this. We talk about the SMH all the time and a lot of these chip names that are not part of the Big Five or the Big Ten, however you want to frame it. But the interesting thing also has been when you look at the industrial space and the effects of just even a couple of those names in the space, just like when we talk about other areas, it can be influenced very, very much by just a single name. So Boeing was that name yesterday, and certainly that was a big factor. Now, we looked at the volatility index, which was trading between 30 and call it 35. We seem to have found this new range, closed around 33.5, but we found what feels like a new range, a range that's somewhere in that low 30 in an area that I've been talking about for a while. And can we penetrate below that, actually closing below that at some point in time? We might see that. Shoot, we might see that today based upon what I'm seeing. So last night we had some really big earnings. Absolutely. And this week, it just seems like the impact of the earnings this week could be as big as any week in the calendar. So we had Google, we had Starbucks, we had AMD. And if you go through those, AMD not trading as well today, but they talked about near-term demand uncertainty, and that seemed to be basically the takeaway from that report. And a little bit of, let's be honest, that's a name that has been absolutely moving and flying to the upside, maybe taking a pause. We've seen a lot of positive paper in there. So will this just be this pause before the next move to the upside? We'll see. Starbucks talked about in June, 90% of the U.S. Starbucks getting close to being opened. And a lot of people talking about safe, convenient, all of that. And of course, that's going to be the priority, I think, for everybody from the airlines on down. But that is something that absolutely the CEO of Starbucks was talking about today on CNBC. Now, Google, that's an interesting one because the different areas in which they are getting those revenues, and we talk about it all the time, the ad revenues and the conditions, are they getting worse or are they improving or are they at least stopped going down? And the sense was they have stopped going down. And because of that, that's why I think you're seeing this great move to the upside today out of Google. And by the way, with this big move out of Google, that is absolutely influencing the NASDAQ. I'll give you a great example of what I mean by that. Right now, this second, I'm going to throw away these other numbers. So this second, The Dow's up almost 500 points, or a 2% move. The Nasdaq's up 250 points, which is a 3% move. And the S&P 500, it's up about 2.25%, something like that, 60 plus points to the upside. So gives you an idea of where the performance is really coming from. And the performance is absolutely coming from those NASDAQ names. Specifically, take a look at Google, which has been the leader. But it's not just Google. Google's been a huge part of it, but it's pulling along Facebook and Apple and some of those other big caps. And that's absolutely moving things to the upside. Now, financials, once again, very, very strong this morning. That's a great sign. They started off the day up about 3%. Industrials as well, moving to the upside. Boeing, it's all over the map each and every day. And Boeing today, it's up. And last I looked, it was up over 6%. So that was a stock moving to the upside as well. What really caused this big move in the markets this morning? In the pre-market, about 45 minutes, an hour before the opening of the day, we had the news of Gilead, and Gilead news certainly has an absolute impact on the markets. We've seen it once before. I talk about single news source. We saw it just a Thursday or so ago. We had that big move out of Gilead as well. Today, it's not just the move out of Gilead, though. Gilead did make a big move. It jumped up towards $84 a share, and it closed well below that level. So a nice big spike up for Gilead. But it's just really the news story around Gilead that people are focusing on, that the treatment news and the trial results seem to have enough of a positive sound to them that people started getting very, very comfortable. And you can see that as easy as anywhere. Take a look at the airlines and the big ramp up you're seeing out of names like Delta and some of the other names are moving to the upside. And we've had some option paper in some of these airline names to the upside, Delta being one of them. Gigantic paper not too terribly long ago, and they were buying May options for the upside. Well, they're getting that move, and here we are still in April. So that's been something of a tell. Materials have also been very, very strong. You take a look just recently at some of the moves in some of these various names. I got Tech Resources, which just hit yesterday. Gigantic paper in Tech Resources yesterday. FCX, look at Alcoa, look at US Steel. Some of these names, the moves that they've made to the upside are certainly something we're seeing today as well. Now, I always like to give you a little bit of an unusual option activity. I got kind of a story part that goes into this whole thing. So when I first started breaking it down, 6 of the 10 names that were hitting early on in an unusual option activity were expiring either Friday, most of those were expiring Friday, or at least extending out one more week. So that's how short-term folks are looking right now. Now, that's changed a little bit just in the last 15 or 20 minutes when I took a peek over at the unusual option activity. A couple September options actually popping in there as well now. But other than that, before that, 10 out of 10 were in the expiration cycle of May alone. Nothing in June, nothing in September, nothing in July, none of that until just a couple of minutes ago. But when I first broke this down, that's what I was seeing. So I got one of these May 1st expirings. They expire on May 1st, which is Friday. Take a look at Uber. We had about 11,000 calls being bought at the May 1st. They had the 33 strike calls. Really inexpensive. They only have 2 days to perform. But what I like about seeing something like this is risk reward, and this makes a little bit of sense when I can easily just take a look and say, well, if things are getting a little bit better potentially from a drug out of a Gilead, and there are so many others that are working on some very, very favorable type of solutions, it seems like we're getting a little bit closer. And if that's the case, that's why you're seeing the impact with the airlines and folks suddenly who have been so negative. Suddenly you start to see all this activity for maybe some positive there. And you're seeing that today. Well, Uber would be put in that category as well. So trying to read through the lines a little bit, maybe that makes a little bit of sense. These are really short term though. So this is something that's just playing on literally the news of today, tomorrow, and obviously into Friday. And so that's that. The last thing I'll tell you is September. I mentioned September being one of the months that people are attacking. And the last couple of unusual option activities that I've seen, take a look at the XLF. There are some very large call buying to the upside out in September in that as well. So it gives you a flavor of what we're seeing right now in the markets. Now, you got to have an understanding of the markets. You got to understand how these options work. You got to understand risk reward and what it means to be long or short a call or a put and all the rest of that. Market Rebellion. That's what we're here for. We're here to educate you and give you the opportunity to have some success, hopefully, in the markets and be able to look at what's going on in the markets and how you can defend yourself or put on positions if you want to, just try to attack the markets in certain ways. I'm Pete Najarian, and once again, have a great day.